Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Crafting Your Next Chapter, Tools for Navigating Successful Career Transitions. I'm Karen Lee, and I'm the Executive Director and founder of FedsFoward. I've moved my public service career across sectors in the federal government, in the private sector, and within a nonprofit. And I and others of us with FedsFoward, we know what these transitions look like from the inside. Let me first tell you just a little bit about what FedsFoward is and why we exist, and then we'll get into it today. We have a lot to go through, and we're really excited to have today this time with you. FedsFoward is a nonprofit that helps federal employees, contractors, anyone who's worked closely with the federal government navigate career transitions. Whether you're thinking about leaving government, exploring what else might be possible, or actively transitioning right now. Today, we are honored to be partnering with the Fairfax County Department of Family Services and United Community, along with Civic Match Work for America, to give you practical tools that you can use immediately, whether you're actively job searching or just want to understand your options. So let's get into it. Slide 2, please. Let's start with what we're going to be accomplishing today. Our goal is simple: to get you to your next career destination, wherever that might be. The objective is to help you figure out where you want to go. And here's the thing, many of you might not know yet, and that is completely okay and totally understandable. Part of what we're going to do today is help you understand what's even possible. So let's talk through our roadmap and how we're going to use our hour or so today together. There are 4 parts. The first part is a framework. What successful transition careers or careers in transition require. We'll walk through the Translate and Integrate Challenge, kind of what we need to do in order to transition our career from one that's focused on the federal sector to another sector. And we're going to talk through the framework for how you do that. Then we're going to move into tools, how to actually execute that, because it's all well and good to know what you have to do, but how to do it and have the support to do it is absolutely necessary. Karen Esser with FedsFoward is going to show you the platform and resources that will help you translate your experience, identify opportunities, and connect. Part 3 is a perspective. We have a very special guest today who is going to help us understand the world outside of government. You'll hear from a private sector employer who has also been a senior leader in the federal government as a civil servant in a fireside chat that will give you real insight into how to best position what you bring to the table by hearing more about non-federal sector realities and needs. And finally, action. We are going to frame up for you what you can do immediately after the session by sharing resources, identifying other tools and support structures, and lay out some concrete next steps. By the end of your investment of about an hour and 10 minutes today, you'll have a framework to guide you, tools to execute, perspective on the other side, and finally, what clear actions to take to move forward. All right, so before we get into it, let's do just a quick poll. Would love you to take a moment, throw into the chat where you are in your career thinking right now. Are you happy where you are, but you want to understand your options? Starting to think about what else might be possible, actively exploring, currently in transition and need to act, or just want to be prepared? This will help us tailor a little bit our conversation today. So thank you. As folks are putting responses in the chat, we see a lot of transitioning and needing to act. Some folks are just exploring, kind of been wanting to learn what's next. I see one who's all of it. I feel that very deeply. We've got a really nice array of where folks are today, and that is great. Everyone on the spectrum, this is amazing because moving through a career transition isn't linear. And what we're going to talk about today, the framework we're going to give you, is something that can help all of you. All right, so I want to move into what is probably the most important thing that I wanted to share with you today, which is that your federal experience, your work with the federal government as a federal employee, a contractor, someone who's worked with the federal sector, is valuable and sophisticated, and it transfers everywhere. Now, some of you might not believe that. I know because inside of the government and working with the federal sector, you have been surrounded by exceptional people like you, doing sophisticated work. So what you do, you might not think is really all that special. In fact, you probably think it's pretty ordinary. Um, but let me tell you that what ordinary looks like in the world that we've been in is anything but. Working in the federal sector, you've likely worked in ambiguity with no playbook. Someone says, hey, we have a new statutory requirement. We got to just stand this up. And you have figured out how to do that with no precedent, with no explicit direction. You've probably navigated competing stakeholders with different authorities and priorities, building consensus despite having conflicting incentives. You might have delivered under regulatory constraints that would paralyze most organizations. You probably have pitched in whenever the mission needed to, adapting on the fly, on the go. And or you've probably just gotten stuff done despite everything. What you have done in working in the federal sector, that adaptive, mission-driven, figure it out competence and way of going about your day, that is so rare and exceptionally valuable, and it transfers. Every organization, nonprofit, private sector, state, local government, they are desperate for people who can manage complexity, who can build consensus across boundaries, who can execute under constraints. And if those are things that sound familiar to you, things that you've done, where that's just your any given Wednesday, know that that is something that is sought after deeply. And so where you're needing to, you're wanting to, you're thinking about how to continue your career in service of the public, maybe outside the federal sector right now, here's how you're going to do it. There is an assignment, and it's very, very simple, but it is maybe not easy to execute, which is why we're going to talk today. But the assignment has two parts. It's translate and integrate. And just quickly to frame up what this assignment is. Translate, what that means is you're going to express what you've done in terms and outcomes and impact that the market, sectors outside the federal government sector will understand. We have to learn and use the language. The second is integrate. Integrate and learn how the sectors actually work so you can apply those skills effectively. And by doing that, by translating and integrate, the power is that you're going to combine your rare expertise with a deep understanding of what people outside of the federal sector need so that you can actually help move forward the mission that you care about. All right, so this slide, where that might make sense to you, yes, you gotta translate your skills and then figure out and integrate what you can do outside of the federal government context. That might make sense. And if you're anything like me, you might be like, let's get on with it. What's the framework? What are the steps? But we need to pause for a moment and talk about mindset, because all of the tactical advice we're going to talk about today, all of that will not help if your internal narrative, the story in your head, how you think about this whole process is working against you. So what I'll say here is, and this sounds very soft and squishy, but believe me, this is really, really critical. The way you think about your transition and moving through this career movement right now will fundamentally affect how successful you are in being able to move from where you are right now to your next place. We have worked with hundreds, if not thousands of folks, and we can tell you your mindset will either accelerate your transition or will completely sabotage it. You can have the perfect resume, the perfect skills, but if you don't frame up how you're going about it, you will never actually get to where you need to go. So when you're thinking about leaving government, or you're in that moment, there are a couple different narratives that we might tell ourselves. And I want to just talk through these and maybe how to think about it in a different way. One thing, one narrative that might be in your head is, I'm leaving the federal government or I'm leaving the federal sector and I'm losing my identity. I worked in the government, I worked with government, that's who I was. And if I'm not working there, I guess I'm no longer a public servant. I no longer can do good work. I would offer to you that this is false. In fact, you're just extending your public service. Your service to the public is not defined by where you get your paycheck, who your employer is. It's defined instead by your commitment to solve problems that matter. The reason why this is important is because your public service identity, what you care about and how you deliver, is one of the valuable attributes that you're going to bring to the table to your next place. So you've got to keep it. A second narrative that that I'd encourage us to think about differently is, my experience only matters in government. What I did in the federal government was that is now behind me, or that is what I did before. That has nothing to do with what I need to be next. What I would offer is no. In fact, your experience in the federal government is critical to transfer it across sectors in order for us to bring the impact that we can bring to our next place. You have to bring what you've done in the federal sector. Every organization needs people who can manage complexity, build consensus, operate under resource constraints. Where you've been doing that for months, years, decades, the question isn't whether your skills and experience transfers, it's where they do and how to frame it so that it's clear that you bring that value. And the last mindset shift that I would offer is, gosh, I'm leaving the federal government. I guess I just am starting all over. And instead, I would offer to you, no, you're just using your skills in a new environment. You are not beginning again. You are an experienced professional, and you're bringing very rare capabilities that most in the economy don't have. And you're bringing it to a different context. And yes, you're going to need to learn how that context works, but you can do it. Okay, so we talked about mindset shift, and now let's move to how you're actually going to do this. And I'm going to take a quick moment to talk about understanding what you need right now, because we have to address this head on. In the poll, we talked about and asked where you are in the process. And there are a couple different places that you might be. You might be needing a job right now, like literally right now, for practical financial, insurance, or other reasons. And so if this is you, the framework we're going to talk about today absolutely applies. But you also will need some very tactical, immediate execution support. If that's where you are, we are happy to talk with you about that separate from this workshop. We'll give you our contact information. But this strategic framework will be helpful to you as you move forward beyond this immediate, urgent need. If you're in a place where you're looking for something more satisfying, you're considering a transition, you're not actively looking, you have a job, but you're curious, those are places where the framework that we're going to talk through today is going to be exactly what you need. So I wanted to be very explicit. If you need something tomorrow because you got to pay the bills, which is so understandable, what we're going to talk about today will be helpful to you, but it's not going to get you your job tomorrow. And I want to be very clear about that, so you know what you're going to get out of today. Okay. So with that on the table, let's get swiftly into the transition framework. Let's get real tactical. I used to play rugby and I love a good play, so we're going to give you the framework with the plays, and there are 4 of them. Translate, research, connect, and select and target. They're not sequential. You're going to loop through these, but this offers a structured way to think about the transition instead of just randomly throwing applications into the void, which I've done. But it doesn't really work well. So we're giving you an approach that will stick. So let's walk through these 4 phases. Phase 1 is translate. Karen, if you can move to the next slide. This is where most people really get stuck. The translate is really where the meat of it is, where we are able to communicate what we've done in the federal sector, which has a lot of jargon, and be able to connect and meet people where they are outside the government and share what we do and why it has value. So there are 2 examples here. I'm not going to read them. You can take a look. But you'll notice the first example on appropriations, what changed in the before versus after. is being very explicit about how that work really attaches to things like resource optimization, operating under constraints, meeting hard deadlines, the ability to determine, interpret, and meet legal obligations, and the fact that you can manage to specific performance metrics. The after in optimizing resource allocation, that is able to communicate something that is more generally applicable outside of the federal sector without some of that jargon. Same too with this interagency coordination example. Looking at the after, what we see there is being able to connect to someone who has never been in the government or in the government sector, and frame up for them that, hey, gosh, you're somebody who's able to work across multiple organizations. You can build consensus, and you're a big deal. You're a big deal because you did it with a gigantic budget. The approach with Translate is to describe what you've accomplished, give some context for why it was hard, and what skills are required. Okay, so that is phase one. Phase two of the framework is research. This is where you learn about industries, organizations, and roles that interest you. Most people skip this step and go straight to applying for jobs, and that's backwards because you cannot target effectively if you don't understand the landscape. But the deeper reason for why this matters, remember earlier the kind of the assignment that I shared with you of how to do these career transitions, where we translate and integrate. It's really difficult to figure out where you would go next if you don't understand what might be out there. You can't adapt your skills to some organization outside the federal sector if you don't know their culture, their business model, what they're trying to solve, and how they solve it. And without understanding and doing some research, you can't speak to solving their problems if you don't know what their problems are based on where they sit. So this research phase, this phase two, isn't about finding job openings. It's about understanding the context that you're considering to genuinely figure out how you could contribute there. And so there are three different vantage points that your research can look at. One is the industries. Where do the problems you care about exist? If you're interested in environmental issues, how does a problem you want to solve present within clean energy companies, consulting firms, environmental nonprofits, and the like? This helps you see how different kinds of industries might see the problem differently. Once you identify the industries, another way to do the research is thinking about different specific kinds of organizations and what their business model is. How do they make money, or how do they just sustain themselves? How do they operate? Who influences the decisions? What gets rewarded? And then finally, roles. What are things called outside of government? And the research that we're talking about here isn't academic. It's critical and very pragmatic and very practical, because it helps you understand where you might want to go next based on what resonates with you, what you like or don't like about different kinds of organizations or different industries or different domain areas. The third phase, connect. This is where you build relationships in sectors that interest you. And the objective here is to learn from people that you respect what problems exist outside of government, and figure out where your specific background can create unusual and unique value that those organizations deeply need. And so notice I didn't say network to get a job. That is transactional, and honestly, that's not the way in which you get a job. You're not networking for an outcome, you're networking for understanding. You're networking here and meeting people to genuinely learn and understand how you can contribute next in the next step of your career. So there are three kind of components of connecting that I think really resonate with us as those who are mission driven, where it's authentic. The first is learning, having informational conversations, attending events, figuring out as a professional what other people do outside of the federal government context that are things that you want to do. Contribute. where you've connected with those different communities outside of government, being part of that community and adding to the ability for you all collectively to solve those problems in ways like sharing articles, making introductions across people who might benefit from knowing each other, and the like. And the last is staying connected, which is maintaining those relationships. And where this takes time, one thing I'll say is that we know from all the research and all the statistics, 70 to 85% of jobs get filled through relationships, not job postings. And so where that is true, going through this process of meeting people who care about things that you do is not only really fulfilling to all of us as people who care about mission, but it also enables you to grow the band, the people that you might want to work with. The good news, I will say, is that you already have this network. The federal alumni community is one of the greatest assets. And one of the things that we are doing with FedsFoward is standing the federal community network, where we're partnering across alumni groups and other organizations and associations to be able to bring us together and network. This is something that we're building, and if you're, where you're here today, we're going to be opening this up directly over the next couple weeks to 2 months or so. Last thing I'll say here is phase 4, which is select and target. And where there's a lot that we're giving you today, don't worry, hold tight. Karen Esser is going to talk to you about how you actually can do this and not feel super overwhelmed. But phase 4 is select and target. And this is where you get really specific to take some meaningful action in identifying actual functions that are needed outside of government, in the government sector, figuring out the specific problems, and assessing how your background can solve those problems. This phase really takes the work that you've done up until this point, researching, talking with people, thinking about what you want, and helps you at least identify and ground what you want to do with a little bit more precision, so you can directionally focus on finding those roles and those organizations that fit what you need. And so where I know I've covered a lot in 20 minutes, you might be thinking, gosh, how do I do all this? This is exactly why at FedsFoward we built our platform. We built it last year, and we're proud to say we did it with a full volunteer corps, which is what we still are. We did it with zero budget and just the grit of our own energy. When you go onto the FedsFoward platform, you'll get access to the tools that will help you translate your experience and start working through the framework that we talked about today. Karen Esser, who I mentioned earlier, she's my colleague and also a former Fed. She's going to show you how the platform actually works, how it can help you move through this process, and ultimately get you to your next place so that you can make an impact. So with that, I'll turn it over to Karen.
Thank you so much, Karen. Hi, everyone. I am the other Karen on the call. You're not imagining things. I am a former Fed myself. I retired about a year ago. And I was eligible for retirement, but I retired a little bit earlier than I thought I was going to. I saw that Feds were going to need a lot of support in making career transitions, perhaps for the first time at this level and this volume. And I happened to, after searching, I happened to find Karen Lee in FedsFoward, which was just getting started. And our whole goal is to provide resources to those of us in our specific set of circumstances right now. So the good news is you're not alone, because you have tools for doing this career transition. We built a tool at FedsFoward, and this tool is AI powered, and it specifically supports transitions from federal employment to the private sector. So whether you're a Fed or a government contractor, this tool is designed for you. And hopefully you are all seeing my screen. I'm sharing my profile on the FedsFoward website. So all you have to do is go to fedsforward.org. And when you go there, you'll see that there will be a red registration button. Because I already registered, you're not seeing it. You'll just click it and register with your name and email address. And then you will get this dashboard that I'm showing. And when you get this dashboard, there's just 3 steps you have to take. The first is you're going to download your resume. And you can see that I have already downloaded my resume. And I recommend downloading your kind of most unruly, longest, most detailed federal resume. This is where that's useful because you want to put in as much information as possible in our platform because it's going to give you results based on the data you put in. So the more the better. So you'll add your resume and then you will click the career wizard. I'm not going to go through the entire career wizard, but it's a series of 13 questions. And these questions are designed to walk you through your career history, past, present, and future, what you did, what you liked about what you did, what you didn't like, and what you would like to do in the future. These are 13 questions. You don't have to answer all 13. You have to answer a minimum of 6 to get the career insights, which I'm going to show you next. But the great thing about the questions is that you can either type them or you can talk them. So if you don't love typing in response to questions, you can actually verbalize and talk your answers. You can do it in 15 minutes or an hour or longer. It's totally up to you. But we do recommend erring on the side of being more detailed rather than less detailed. And the reason for that is once you add your answers to the 13 questions, you will get your career insights. And these are tailored recommendations for you. What I'm showing you now are my career insights based on the information I put in. And you'll see it's in 4 categories. It gives you soft skills, hard skills, your work style, and specific job options. So, because we don't have time to go through everything, I'm going to show you my hard skills. So you'll see this is the very first one at the top, right? The program identified EEO complaint investigation. And what it does for each of these skills, and this is just my first one, it describes the skill and it shows how it's applicable in the federal sector. And the last thing it does, which I love, is it gives you language for describing it to a non-Fed. So this is language that you can use in a job interview or in your resume, and it will do that for each of your skills. So the next thing, I guess I'll stop at work style too. I love this section. I wasn't going to show it to you, but I really do like it. It gives you your core strengths, and then it gives you the work environments that it thinks you're going to like based on your answers. And so you'll see that for me, it identified nonprofit organizations. And ironically enough, I did end up in a nonprofit organization after my federal service here at FedsFoward. So it was right. And so the last thing I want to show you is job options. So for the job options, gave me about 8 different job options. It's going to give you a title of a role in the private sector based on your federal sector experience that you input. So for me, it gave me equal opportunity and civil rights policy advisor. It describes the role and it tells me how my background is relevant. And it identifies my key strengths that I bring to that role and also some suggested strengths I may need to develop. So it will do that for each of the roles. And we're not going to go through every one, but you see it gave me multiple roles for me to look at. And that is the magic of this program. So once you complete the career wizard, you will get these results and you'll end up with your federal skills translated, which is so critical so we can describe accurately what we've done to private sector folks. You'll get language you can use in your resume and during interviews, and we'll be talking about how important that is when we talk to Catherine Manfrey in just a little bit. And you'll get suggested roles. So you'll get a lot of the way through the 4 phases of the career transition search framework that Karen Lee just went through. So before we leave our FedsFoward platform, I want to show you one other feature, and that is resources. So this is on the same website. You just go to fedsforward.org. You click resources on the upper right, and these resources are great because they are specifically targeted for federal to private sector career transitions. So all of our articles, podcasts, webinars are from the perspective of a Fed or a government contractor looking in the private sector. You'll get everything from financial planning to interviewing to onboarding, and even retirement. Every possible topic you can think of for the transition. And I'm just going to show one, and you'll see that there are filters on the left side, so you can pick your topic. But we get a lot of questions about resumes. And so I just want to share the resume resources that we have. And we have several articles and a podcast on writing your resume. Ooh, I see it didn't there. Hold on. There we go. Writing your resume. And the articles are from the perspective of writing both a two-page federal resume and a private sector resume. So these are great resources you can check out now or after the webinar, after this webinar. And we really hope that you find these valuable. So I'm going to stop sharing now. And we are going to speak to our keynote speaker of the day. And I'm going to try to then reshare the PowerPoint presentation, Karen. Let's see. Just give me 1 minute.
Would you like me to do that, Karen?
Yeah, that would be great if you can.
Absolutely.
So we have, up to this point, we've talked about career transitions from your side, from the job seeker side. Let's flip to the employer side. And with us today is Catherine Manfrey from Capital One. Catherine is the Chief of Staff to the CHRO of People Strategy and Analytics. Catherine is well versed in the government to private sector career pivot. Before joining Capital One, she served as the Chief Transformation Officer at the Office of Personnel Management, OPM, and was also a partner at the Boston Consulting Group, where she had multiple roles. Catherine, we're so glad that you are here with us today. You have navigated in and out of the private sector and government. Can you tell us what are your biggest lessons learned from these experiences? And are there things that felt particularly important from the employer standpoint?
Thanks, Karen. And first, just wanted to say thank you for having me to this event. Wanted to thank everyone on the line also for your service. I know this has been a challenging year for many of you. And so excited to be here and share what I can about some of my journey in and out of private and public sector. So I think that a few words of wisdom that I've picked up from my time, and I think, Karen, you gave me an exceptional intro. The other piece of my journey was prior to BCG, I actually started my career in international development. I lived in Egypt for 4 years working for a branch of the World Bank. So sort of started my roots in the public sector, went to business school, and then landed at BCG. And then the rest, Karen, I think gave you a little bit of the journey so far. So I think one reflection I've had from all of those different careers that I've had so far is you rarely land where you think you're going to land at the start of a job search. I'm pretty sure that if you had read my business school application essay, it had said something to the effect of going into nonprofit management or higher education management. And instead, I ended up at a management consulting firm, which feels pretty different from both of those things. I think if I had done this exercise when I was at BCG, thinking of coming into government, and I'd created like a list of all of the agencies that I might be inspired to work for and like what kinds of roles I'd looked through the plum book. I had read through USA Jobs postings to try to get a feel for the kinds of roles in government. And I don't think that OPM was actually on that original list as a specific example. So I think that the first thing I would share is to keep a really open mind when you're going through, especially if you're trying to make a pivot or a major transition from one sector to the other, because what you think you might want to do might actually end up being a very different thing than when you end up doing. I think the second thing is about having a really good point of view of the most important thing that you're optimizing for. As an example, when I was coming out of business school, I think the thing I was most optimizing for was just learning as much as I could. And so for that, like going to a consulting firm where I was on the road 4 days a week was like not a problem because the learning was so high. When I was coming into OPM, I had a very young daughter. She was about 18 months old. That was maybe not the thing I was optimizing for at that moment in my life. And so I think that having like a perspective on what is the thing that you are most trying to get, sometimes that's salary, sometimes that's location, sometimes it's, trying to do as close to the thing you were doing before as possible. But I've tried over time to like actually have like that list actually written down so that I can like make sure that I'm like aligning what I need for me. And then I think the third thing, and this is maybe Karen a little bit more related to the point on like the employer perspective, particularly, is I think that a lot of times candidates tend to generally do a good job of explaining like why they are a great person to have, their skills, their background, their experience. I think that there are two other really important parts of the equation, though, and this is like drawing upon all of my experiences from BCG, OPM, and Capital One together, is employers also want to know why them. So although they are assessing you and whether or not that you have the right qualifications and skills, but they also want to know like if you're excited about the role that you are applying for. And so you plus me is like the first part of the equation. And then like the equal sign is us. So I think the thing that really exceptional candidates do is they lay out why them, why the employer, and then why those two things coming together is the optimal thing to have happen. And I think that folks that have done, especially the previous step of understanding what they want to optimize for and have spent a good amount of time reflecting on their career history to date, I think find it a lot easier to then put that equation together, which often comes across really well in interviews.
Thank you, Catherine. I love that equation. You plus me equals us. I'm going to remember that. And I think that's why it's so important to do the research in the four-phase career transition framework that Karen mentioned earlier, because you do need to know about the organization that you're looking at in order for them to understand that you really want to work there and that you're really a good fit. So thank you for that. That's a really good mantra to have. So moving on to the second question for you. So I understand you've spoken to a number of people coming out of federal government. Are there particular observations you've had about what those individuals bring to the table or ways that those candidates have differentiated themselves?
Yeah, Kara, it's such a great question. So, like you mentioned, I've talked to a lot of former colleagues from OPM and elsewhere across government in the last year about, what is this like scary thing called the private sector like, or what do I even like start to think about? Especially, I think those folks who maybe found themselves in career transitions that they weren't expecting to have in 2025. And so, I think like maybe a few things to mention. Plus like some observations, especially from folks that I've seen successfully land even in more major career pivots. I think the first thing is, to the extent it is possible, trying to find a friendly face or voice within an organization that you're considering wanting to work for. I think one of the things that has felt very easy, I would imagine, for folks that have talked to me is like, I know the acronym soup of government. I understand what it's like to have to like go talk to OMB or justify your budget to Congress or like all of the many things that some of you have probably had to do over the course of your federal careers. That's just like very different from the way a lot of private sector companies particularly work. And so I think to the extent you are able to find someone, whether that's someone who might be a veteran or a former Fed, I think that often allows for a much easier, at least initial conversation to understand the organization. Um, I think on the other point is around translating the experience that you've had into sort of, I wouldn't even say it's private sector speak. I think it's just like non-government speak. Because I think I'm sure as many of you who have been around in federal government can appreciate, there is like a particular way that government speaks about itself that I think doesn't always resonate with folks outside of government. And I think one of the things that I did that I think was really helpful was not only talking to people at companies that I was interested in, but was also just talking to friends that have never worked in government, that have nothing to do with organizations I was interested in, and trying to explain the work I had done at OPM and seeing if it just made sense to them. as a maybe like a sort of funny story is I have a now 5-year-old who's 18 months in the previous example, now 5, because that's how time works. But when I've tried to explain government to her, I have explained it as government is about helping people. And my job at OPM was like even more of that. Now, I don't know that you need as basic of a version as that one to describe all of your many decades of career experience in government, but I do think there's like a how do I just describe this in common language that I think then makes it easier to like specifically translate to the specific company or role that you are looking at. And I think the folks that I've talked to that are able to do that the most cleanly, I think have the easiest time, especially if and when they end up talking to an employer who does not have the benefit of a long history in government. And then I think the last thing, Karen, I would mention to this group is I think to the extent you can think about the closest pivot or adjacency to the work you've been doing in government, the easier I think it becomes to try to explain and translate that experience. So, as an example, like I'll give 2 examples of this from my own background. So when I was coming out of BCG, I had one of the reasons why OPM actually made a lot of sense was I had done a lot of transformation work at BCG. And at the time, OPM was going through a major data strategy update. And my boss, who I ended up working for, actually was a former BCGer, had been out for a while. And so he was able to both, one, understand my private sector background and how that would translate into government, but then also, I was able to pivot some of those skills that I had from consulting into the first role that I had at OPM. And I think that made it a lot easier. The second specific pivot that I would mention is when I was coming out of OPM to Capital One. So my role at Capital One is in HR, which, as I think most of you know, that OPM is the HR agency for the federal government. So it was like I'd sort of like picked up a like pseudo specialty in HR from that time. So I think that helped with that. And then the other piece, which I actually didn't fully appreciate when I was first talking to Capital One, was that Capital One, because they're in the financial sector, is heavily regulated. And coming out of government, I think that is like a natural pivot or adjacency from being in government, where you have to deal with a lot of regulatory oversight and different bodies asking you a lot of questions about the work that you're doing.
Thank you, Catherine, for those fantastic examples. It's really helpful to get a picture of how to do the pivot. I think I have a new book in mind, How to Explain Government to a 5-year-old. I love it. Next question. Thinking about federal candidates who successfully pivot to the private sector, what do they tend to do before they apply that makes a difference from the employer side?
Yeah, I think Karen, I heard you saying this as I was joining, was around really understanding the industry and the specific role. I mean, some of this is just as simple as like doing some desk research. I think that is certainly one. I think also, again, to the extent possible, to talk to folks either within that specific organization or others like it. I think that just like helps to get a more rounded out view, not only of what the company does or what the role is all about, but what are the values of that given company and the culture. I think that one of the things I think a lot of big private sector employers often hold very dear is their culture as an organization. And there are a lot of similarities between culture. I mean, I've worked at now like 4 fairly large organizations over the course of my career. I think there's certainly some things that are very common, but there are also often things that are like very unique. And I think teasing out what those things are, both so that you can understand if those are things you would want to be a part of, which I think is a equally as important part of the journey as sort of making sure that they understand why you're a great fit for their organization. But it's also around making sure that you can then tailor your responses to different questions that you might be getting. So I think that's one. I think the second one is really talking about the why. So both why you're interested in that organization, that role at this moment in time, what is it again that you plus me equals us kind of framework. Um, I think the last thing I would mention is that I know from being in government, I think there's a lot of folks that either haven't ever worked in the private sector or haven't worked in it for very long. And I think there's sometimes a view that it's like this very black box, very different kind of world. And I think to some degree that is true. But I also think it might be helpful to remember that at the end of the day, both sectors, if you will, are staffed by humans. And there's something like very common about organizations that are made up of humans. There's a lot more similarities than I think there are differences, actually. I think one observation I have, especially from my consulting days, is that large organizations tend to have very similar kind of challenges in how they operate. Layers like decision-making processes, standard operating procedures, et cetera. And I think that a lot of those things are not actually unique to one sector or the other. And so I mentioned that only to maybe give those of you that feel the private sector is like this scary, distant thing that is very different from government, a sense that actually like there's a lot more similarities, I think, than there are differences in a lot of places.
Thank you, Catherine. Great answer. You make clear from your experiences how critical it is to know something about the industry, about the
Mhm.
organization going into the interview. I think sometimes we forget because we get all focused on ourselves, right? How are we going to appear? But it's so important to kind of shift that focus to the industry and the organization and talk about the why. That's a big takeaway for me. Why that organization at this time. So thank you for making that really clear to us. Next question. From a business standpoint, where do you see federal experience creating real value once someone is hired?
Karen, I think this might be like my favorite question. Because this one I could probably talk about for a really long time, but I will keep my answer as succinct as possible. So, look, I've worked with a lot of different people, and there was such incredible talent that I got the opportunity to work with when I was in government. And I have been a huge advocate of government talent to basically anyone who has asked me for my opinion on this subject in the past year or so. I think there's like a few specific things, though, that I have routinely tried to explain to people about the value of folks coming out of federal government that I don't know that is often top of mind. So there's like obviously all the very specific technical subject matter expertise that I'm sure all of you have in your respective domains that like I don't want to diminish that. I think the outside of that, though, I think the first one I would mention is resilience. So, for any of you who have nightmares about the term unfunded mandate, as an example, like I think the resilience of civil servants to handle any number of new, changing, rapidly evolving priorities is one that is very unique, in my view, to government. And I think often many of us are probably have been in positions where you are getting feedback from the public, from your leadership chains, from your peers, from other agencies, from other oversight bodies. That is like a lot of things to have to manage while also delivering on the mission. And I think that resilience is really special and unique of civil servants. The second one, which is a little related, is the ability to problem solve within constraints. So I know I was at OPM when we got, a Congress told us we had to do something in a very short time frame with not, in our view, enough money. And that was a really challenging thing to do. And I saw over the course of my time on this particular body of work, a couple hundred people all trying to figure it out together of how we were going to deliver on this very important and big priority for the agency. And I think that I'm sure there's like a version of that that many of you can relate to. And I think that is like a second part of the answer. I think the third one is in many roles, if not all roles in government, you are dealing with like an incredibly complex stakeholder map, whether that is, again, the general public, your peers, other agencies, oversight bodies. It's just a lot of people to keep informed and to get feedback from and react to that I think is very special about civil servants. And then I think the last one is the dedication to mission. And I think like mission in the private sector kind of is like looks and feels a little bit different. But I would argue that if you ask most folks in the private sector, they probably wouldn't call it mission, but they might call it goals, they might call it objectives, they might call it a different name. They might call it like customer experience, which I know is a term that we do use in government, but they might call it like, what does the customer need? But to me, it's like kind of all the same thing. It's that ability to put the most important objective of the organization first and primary. And I think in government, I don't know that I ever ran into a civil servant who didn't know what their mission was. both at the top and at like their, more granular level. And I think that that is like a really important value proposition that federal workers can bring to the private sector.
Thank you, Catherine, for reminding us just how amazing our federal community is. And, Karen Lee and I often hear from so many people like you who are singing the praises of federal employees. The obstacles that we have to face and overcome on an hourly basis are incredible. And working at these very large organizations, my largest agency was 55,000 employees. You need incredible resilience. And so thank you so much for reminding us of our value. So before we close up, I do want to touch on resumes and interviews just a little bit because we get a lot of questions on these subjects. So when you review resumes and interview federal candidates, can you speak to some things that may be detrimental, may hurt them in the interview or resume process, and also some things that stand out as positives that make you think that the person really is ready for the private sector?
Yeah, I mean, I know, Karen, you all were giving the sort of overview of the tools that you've built to help with some of that resume writing. I think that, and I know there's like some debate about there about how long your resume should be and how short it should be, which I think, there's some like varying opinions on that particular topic. So I'll try to give some things that maybe are a little differentiated so that I'm not being overly repetitive from things you've already talked about. I think that one is focusing on the impact or the outcomes that you personally help to achieve. I think that is one that I often see. Not, I wouldn't say that's like unique to federal employees. That's like just sort of across the board. It's like across the board observation. I think a lot of times folks fall into the trap of writing something that is more like a job description bullet versus an impact bullet of like what was the thing, like what was the result, what was the impact, what was the thing that I specifically did. I think a related point, again, I think this is not unique to federal workers, but a broader observation from a decade and a half of reading resumes is is talking about what the team did versus what they did in the team. And I don't think it there to me is a difference between acknowledging that you were a part of a team, but also describing your unique role within that. And I think that's also something I often see get folks tripped up in interviews as well. Like I'll have someone give this great interview story of this thing, and at the end of the answer, I'm like, I actually don't know what you specifically did in this example. Although I'm very impressed by the team outcomes. So I think that's like another one. Um, and then I think the last one, I don't know if this is a best practice, but it is something I did, and so I'll share it with you all. Is this to this point of like translating the government work? Is I at the like this very tactical, but like the top right under my like title at OPM, like had a sentence or two about what OPM did and like the population it served, because I think that often the numbers of people that you all were likely serving or impacting or the size of your agencies, like that is probably common knowledge amongst for you and for your colleagues is often not common knowledge amongst folks outside of government. So I think there's like either tactics or if you're talking to someone, like a moment to just really explain factually, like what is it that your agency did. So like as an example, my resume says something to the effect of like, OPM is the human capital agency for the federal government. It serves the roughly 2.3 million civil servants by providing human capital policy benefits and retirement services, something to that effect. Because I think it is really useful to put context first around the scale of government, because I think often the scale is very different than a lot of things often are in the private sector, not always, but often. And so I think just making sure that you're giving some of that context so that someone you're talking to can like anchor on how your experience relates to the organization that they are or the role that they're trying to fill.
Such amazing advice, Catherine. I really took away some key points from that answer that we have to focus on impact rather than job duties. I think often, like you said, we do just list our job duties, what we did, rather than the impact that they had. And that one little change can make a huge difference. And the other thing that I think that we do is, and this is kind of a good thing, we focus on the team rather than ourselves. And I think that's, Catherine, your answer is a great reminder to focus on what you did as part of the team, as well as what the team did. And then I think, like, the final reminder that I got is don't assume that everyone knows on the outside knows what your agency did. Even though we talk about cabinet level agencies all the time,
Mhm.
just don't really know the inside baseball at that agent at that particular agency. So I think it's great not to make that assumption and to describe very simply what your agency did. Catherine, thank you so much for your wonderful insights on how feds can successfully pivot and leverage themselves effectively in the career transition process. Truly appreciate you being here with us today and sharing your wonderful experience.
Yeah,
And with
thank you,
that,
Karen. Yeah, thank you,
with
Karen and Karen, for having me. And I just wanted to say, like, just to underscore one thing I said at the beginning, I just want to thank everyone for your service. For those of you that are still there, like, I appreciate your continued support. You have at least one fan over here. You have actually have many more than one fans, because I know there's a lot of other folks over here that are either former feds or very excited about feds. So I just wanted to say thank you to all of you for your service, and really appreciate the time.
thank you, Catherine. So before I turn the mic over to our next guest, I want to talk a little bit about how to get started. I think that based on what Catherine shared with us, I think it kind of crystallizes how you can begin to get started in your career search. And the good thing is, you don't need to do everything at once. There's just a couple things to do. And we'll go to the next slide that you can start doing immediately. So we recommend 2 or 3 small steps. The first step we think that's most important is to do the platform that we reviewed today, because that's going to give you the non-government language that you need to begin to be able to articulate your background effectively in your career documents, like your resume and your interviewing. The next thing is to identify some positions of interest and the organizations where they exist. As Catherine mentioned, the folks that you interview with want to hear about why you chose them. So it's very important to do a little bit of research, and it doesn't have to be a lot. And then I think the next thing that becomes really important is find some friendly faces, as Catherine said, at these organizations, so you can hear more about what they really do, to test your research, to make sure that you really want to do that kind of work. So these steps, they're really small steps. You can do them in 5 hours or 10 hours, but it will take you a long way in your career journey and have a much bigger impact than the time it took just to engage in those steps. So with that, we're going to move on to the next slide just to introduce our FedsFoward team. This is our small but mighty FedsFoward team that is doing this work and created the platform. And with that, and please feel free to reach out to any one of us. I know Karen Lee will put our contact information in the chat. And with that, I am thrilled to turn the mic over to a wonderful colleague, Stacy Eichner, who's with another organization that is doing such great work for feds and contractors, called Civic Match. And Stacy, I'm going to let you explain your mission and all the wonderful things you're doing for feds.
Thanks so much, Karen. Appreciate you all including us in the program today. And thanks everyone for joining. So just a little bit about Work for America and Civic Match. Work for America is a nonpartisan nonprofit tackling the government staffing crisis in communities nationwide. We're aiming to make public service a more desirable, accessible, and stable career path. And we do this by helping state and local governments recruit, retain, and empower the next wave of public servants, ensuring better services and a stronger America. Next slide, please. Just a little bit about Civic Match. So Work for America runs Civic Match. It is a talent matching platform connecting mission-driven professionals with jobs in state and local government. We launched this about a year ago, and we've seen results. In 2025 alone, 1 in 5 governments that posted roles through our site made at least one hire. So governments are really using Civic Match to find great talent. You can sign up at civicmatch.org. I'll drop some links into the chat shortly. And we're currently accepting candidates who are career civil servants, worked in the federal government, were federal contractors, or we're from a nonprofit that were affected by federal grant cuts. We're working to also expand the candidate pool in the coming weeks. So when you sign up for our newsletter on our site, you can learn more about that. And just to give you guys a little bit of background on how Civic Match works, once you sign up for our platform, you're able to see a job board and it's roles posted across the country. You're able to sort by location and various states, skill area, experience level, and many more filters. And there's real people behind the scenes. So similar to FedsFoward, we have a team of people who are working with our candidates and with our hiring managers to make those connections across the country for people to stay in public service at the state and local government. Our Civic Match team also works with our state and local governments to recruit for their open roles. So we will send them a list of qualified candidates. Some of the roles are public on our site, and sometimes they use our site for confidential roles, and we use our candidates to send that over to them. Next slide. A couple of things and resources to keep in mind. Once you become a Civic Match candidate, which you can sign up on civicmatch.org/sign up, you're able to use our resources and our partnerships. We work with FedsFoward, who you heard from today, on a ton of different events and give their resources out to our candidates. We work with Grounded Idealists to help people have access to coaching sessions. And we work with Innovate US, who has courses to learn more about AI and data-driven problem solving. We'll put those that URL in the chat right now for our resources page. And then we can go to the next slide. So just to get the most out of Civic Match, when you sign up for our platform, you will be able to immediately have access to our job board. You'll be able to keep your profile up to date. When you keep your profile up to date, it helps us and hiring managers know your latest. So whether you're looking to change areas, whether you have a change in your job, whether you want to update your resume, you can do all of that after you sign up. So don't feel like once you click submit, that's the last time you have to do that. Look at our job board often. It's being updated automatically. So encourage you to set a time and day in your week that works for you to look at that. When you're interested in a job, you can click Save Job or mark it as applied after you applied. That alerts both the Civic Match staff and the hiring manager at the state and local government. So it helps get your resume flagged. And then the last thing I'll say is when you're part of our network, you're able to access all of our resources, including a lot of events we host. We do a lot of virtual job fairs where you can talk with state and local governments directly. We do resources and candidate workshops, like resume workshops. And then we do partner events with other people that are in our line of work, trying to help outgoing federal workers find their next steps. So that's all for me today. I'm going to put in some links into the chat right now for Work for America and Civic Match, how to log on. And I will pass it back over to Karen. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Stacy. And thank you for the good work you're doing on behalf of feds and matching them to state and local jobs. One thing that Karen Lee and I have learned is that the states really want feds. There's a huge amount of interest. They want that expertise of working in large systems and managing federal dollars on very large scale programs. So if you have that as an interest, please know that there are states and local governments that want you. At this point, I want to let everyone know that there will be a survey, and maybe our friends in Fairfax County can put the survey link in the chat. We would love for you to take the survey so we can keep improving our programming to you and making sure that we address your needs. I've also on this slide listed, although it's in the chat as well, the resources that are available to feds and contractors, anyone really looking for the private sector transition or the non-government transition. We hope that you leave today with a little bit more clarity on how you can move forward in your career transition. And please remember, you don't have to wait for opportunities to find you. You can and should design your next career move and choose where you want to go. And you can reach out to any of the organizations here today, FedsFoward, Civic Match, and all of in Fairfax County. They have wonderful resources on their website. Karen, unless you have anything you want to add, as soon as you do, we will pass over back to Fairfax County to close out our session.
So Karen, there are a couple comments in the chat. If we do have a couple more minutes, I believe we have until 1:15, if I'm not mistaken,
Yes.
for us to address. So let me put these out there. And Karen, you and I, Stacy, feel free to jump in. And our colleagues from Fairfax County, feel free to do so as well. One that was put in the chat reads, it has been really hard, very hard to get a job, not only in private sector, but also in government, even with the best qualifications. I've applied for more than 28 jobs. None of them are being called for an interview. My resume is being reviewed, but the person is still waiting. Please give me advice. A response to that was, I've had the same experience. I've revised and updated my resume for the private sector, but haven't gotten any reviews. And so I think both of these have the same sentiment of, gosh, I'm having a really tough time. The market's really difficult. I'm trying to work on my resume, but I'm not getting anything back. Before I respond, I'd like to just open it up to Karen, Esser, Stacy, or others, and then I can kind of round it out with some thoughts.
Yeah, I'm happy to speak to the state and local government aspect, but both Karens would love your input too. On our state and local governments, for everyone that I've worked with since starting, they don't use an automated like AI screening there. They have people behind that are looking at every single application being submitted. One thing that I would encourage is that when you read the job descriptions, especially for state and local governments, and you see the minimum qualifications required, where that says required is truly what is required for them to move you to the next stage. So look at that and make sure that you meet those qualifications before you spend the time submitting your application. Now, I would say if you only meet some of the preferred qualifications, I would definitely go ahead and submit it. Those are quite literally preferred, but not necessary. But when they are required, they are truly required. So when it says required 10 years of experience, but you have 5 working years, even though if they're the most 5 important working years, it will get caught in the system when they're doing their check boxes of not being able to check all those boxes.
Yep. And I can just add to what Stacy said. I know with Fairfax County government, like Stacy said, the minimum requirements, you have to meet those. If you don't, you won't get pulled over to the next. No matter how great your resume is, if you don't meet those minimum requirements, no one will look at your application or resume. So make sure that you're meeting that qualifications for that. Also, we have for Fairfax County our own Department of Human Resources teams. We have an info session that we do. We do it once a quarter. I think we just had one 2 weeks ago. But it's actually, we have 3 people from our own HR team with the county that comes and gives tips and tricks on how to use the system when you're applying, how you should answer certain questions, the response time, when you see certain things as far as your current status, what that means. So those things are huge. So I will speak to you guys, kind of give you an introduction so you guys know who I am. But I will share all of that stuff with you, and it'll give you a link to our page that has all of our sessions that have coming up. And you'll see that it says Fairfax County Info Session, I think DHR Info Session. But they're free, they're virtual if you want. And it'll give you some tips. So that's one suggestion I have for you.
Yeah, thank you, Kellen. Fairfax County, and I'm sure there are others, have done a wonderful job of reaching out to the federal community. So please check out their resources because you'll get some good tips on how to apply for jobs.
To complement Stacy and Kellen, in addition to getting through that first hoop, to the extent that there are minimum qualifications, I wanted just to kind of emphasize the point that sitting on the other side of the table for those hiring managers, remember, they are receiving a lot of applications. And in large part, that is why blindly applying for jobs without having some connecting points to understand what those roles are and understand the organizations is going to make it very, very challenging. To put in perspective of how we might on this in this webinar might think about it as a community, we're not looking for just a job, generally speaking. We're looking for something that actually means something to us. And so just in that, with that in mind, being putting in some of that time to do the research and connect with people that are affiliated and associated with the organization, industry, kind of area of work is not only so that you could get the job, but honestly to flip the script so that you can decide if it's something that you actually want. And once, for every one of you who has been successful in the federal sector, the only reason why you've been so at its core is because you cared about it. And so you put your all into it. So too here. As you connect with employers who specifically are ones that you'd want to work with and build relationships with people doing what you want to do, that in addition to some of the very tactical kind of bread and butter things that you heard that need to get done, that's what's going to differentiate you and get you into the role that you should, be coupled with. That you plus me equals us will be very clear. One other thing I'll just note is that the platform that Karen Esser showed not only provides you with those career insights to help you better target what you might want given what you value, but also your skills and experience. But as we're moving forward with FedsFoward, we are actively developing the infrastructure, and we are doing it right now. It's just a little more manual to match talented people like yourselves to employers. And so those who register on our platform, we are going to be, that will enable us to connect you with potential employers, hiring managers who might be looking for someone like you with your background, interests, and values. So that is the other benefit as we grow our program and grow the infrastructure that we know we need. Ultimately, that is what's going to help us circulate this incredible talent that you have to every sector.
Thank you, Karen. As you pay attention to FedsFoward, you'll see that we'll be offering more and more job opportunities and having the resources to connect them with your specific background if you're interested. With that, I want to turn the mic over to Kellen Graves with Fairfax. I know he already spoke, but there are a few other updates that I know that he wants to share with us, exciting updates for federal employees and contractors.
Yep. Thank you, Karen. Thank you both Karens for the wonderful presentation. Stacy as well, and Catherine as the employer. That was great stuff. Again, introducing myself, my name is Kellen Graves, and I'm the Employer Engagement Team Supervisor with Fairfax County Department of Family Services. Before I say anything, I want to thank you all for taking the time out of your day to attend this workshop, which was great, and then taking the time to invest in your future. I thank you for doing that. Although there was a lot of people on this call, there are a lot of people who weren't on the call. So it's just showing that you're taking that extra effort to reach out and find out about resources. So that's huge. I know everyone on this call is thinking about transitioning, whether that's you were laid off in the last year, you're thinking about making a move, and we want to be able to support that. So one way we're able to support that is we are having a career fair that's going to be specifically focused on those federal workers and contractors who were laid off within the last year or so. But it's open to the public. But most of those employers are going to be looking for, again, the feds, contractors. But again, it's open to anyone who's looking at transitioning. We'll have all types of employers there. It's going to be on Thursday, February 26th from 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. And it's going to be at the Fairfax County Government Center. Don't worry about writing this down. Everyone who was on this call, I have everyone's email. I'm going to email you all of that information. I will also make sure I email any links that Karen you want to share with me to share with the group, and Stacy as well about the platforms you guys have. So you'll get all that information in the email. But this career fair, again, Thursday, February 26th, 1 to 4 at the Fairfax County Government Center. Just an idea of some of the employers that are going to be there. We have CACI is going to be there, PRISM, Capital One. We'll have the school systems there. So Fairfax County Public Schools will be there. Loudoun County Public Schools will be there. We'll have local government there. So you'll have Fairfax County, City of Manassas. So we've covered the whole Northern Virginia region, and there's many more. That's just some of the ones I'm kind of giving you. But we're going to look for, the goal is up to 50 employers. So look out for that email that I sent to you all, and please make sure you register. There'll also be workshops going on. Our own FedsFoward will have a workshop there. Fairfax County Public Schools will have a workshop, and then some other resources to be able to support you all, which were financial resources, will be there to talk about those. So I think it will be a great event, and I hope to see you all there. If you see me at the event, because I'll definitely be there, pull me to the side if you see me, be like, hey, and see if we can talk, and I could possibly introduce you to some of the employers that will be there. All right. So I don't, Karen, did you guys have anything else to say? You want me to go ahead and wrap it up? I didn't know if you want to have.
One question, that list of employers that will be at the job fair, is that
Yes.
posted on your website?
Yes. So again, when you click the link to register, it will take you to Eventbrite. And that page, it says it's updating currently. So like every day we add an employer. So we'll have the list of employers there. There are already, I think, 31 employers we have on that list, but it changes. So just regularly go back and check it. We'll start putting positions there so you'll know exactly what positions people are hiring for. So you can start doing some research and kind of tailoring your resume. So yes, we'll have all the information of the employers that'll be there, and it's also some of the positions. We won't be able to put them all because there's so many, but we'll try to highlight the big employers in those positions so you can do some research.
So
Okay.
this career fair event is a wonderful target to think about how to use what we've talked about today and put it into practice for a
Yep.
purpose. By identifying what your translatable skills are, having language in which to communicate it, and then coupled with, Kellen, the website and page that will have not only employers but specific roles, will give you all the different piece parts to then frame up what you might want to target so that when you do go to that career fair, you can with precision be able to, as Catherine said, articulate why you, why them, and why together the us makes sense. So Kellen, thank you.
Yep. Thank you. And again, I love that equation too, the you plus me equals us. And I want you guys to leave from this knowing that you're not on this alone. Our area, our Northern Virginia area, whether it be the local government, nonprofits, we're all pulling together to be able to support you all. So don't feel like you're in this alone. This is a us thing. So we definitely have your back. We're rooting for you, and hope to see you guys on the 26th. So thank you all. You take care.